I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Hello, everyone. You are listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and when this episode airs, I'm going to be at the beach. At the beach, just ordering as many pina coladas and orders of French fries as I can. Super stoked about that. I don't know why French fries. Actually, I do know why French fries. The first family vacation that I remember, my brother and I were blown away that you could order food brought to you at the pool. And so we would order French fries and virgin strawberry daiquiris all the time. And we're just so tickled by it. And now I'm as an adult, as a 32-year-old, tickled by an all-inclusive vacation. So some things never change. But yes, I am super excited to have a little bit of a break. The last year has been insane, but in the best way. I don't know. I was thinking about this the other day. I was journaling after doing some meditating and just thinking about how grateful I am for all of the growth that I've experienced. I love who I am, and that was something that I struggled with in the pandemic. I feel like a lot of people kind of lost their sense of self, and I definitely was one of them. But I think I found her again, and I think I'm better than ever. But that being said, it's also been exhausting, right? I've been at this new job for 8 months, and I'm just learning new things every day, and it's stressful. It's wonderful, but it's stressful. So I'm looking forward to just having a break and being able to not think and just read and laze about. My friend Anna and I have no concrete plans. And speaking of my friend Anna, happy birthday. Obviously she's going to be with me, so I know it's going to be a great time. Also happy birthday to my cousin Devin. Have a great day. And speaking of dates and anniversaries or whatever, birthdays, anniversaries, same thing. Sunday, August 14th, is the 2-year anniversary of when Wine, Dine, and 69's first episode aired, which is pretty crazy. I don't know if I'm surprised that I made it this far or not. I don't know. It's just kind of something that I've kept plugging along doing because it makes me happy and it inspires me, and it will continue to do so. But super excited. 2 years, and I'm so thrilled with all of the progress that the show has made, all of the guests that we've had on, the people who share their stories and share their expertise. I've learned a ton, and I really hope that you have too. And speaking of, special episodes, because this is the 2-year anniversary, I wanted to do something a little bit different and special. So today's guest is somebody that I've known for a really long time. They are probably the smartest person that I know. They're definitely the kindest person that I know. It's my mom. And that probably isn't a huge surprise because it's probably in the episode title. I'm probably going to put in the episode title. So I guess that's less of a gotcha than I was thinking it was going to be. But oh well. Yeah, my mom, Dawn Newton, is today's guest, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about her childhood, her life, her relationship with dating, love, mortality, because as listeners know, she has stage 4 lung cancer. And yeah, we'll talk about sex as well, which I know is crazy to some people that I might talk to my mom so openly about that subject, but I don't know. It's just always kind of been this way, and we talk about that in the episode as well, how she kind of worked to develop this dynamic that we have. So yeah, some people think it's weird. My friends are always like, I can't believe they were able to talk to your mom that way about stuff. But yeah, we do. And I couldn't be more thrilled with the dynamic that we have. I feel like I can go to her with anything. And yeah, as a 32-year-old, that's a pretty cool thing to be able to say. So I just love my mom. I did want to correct myself, though, so I want to avoid everybody wildly scrolling Netflix trying to find the movie Pure. The movie Pure that we talk about in this episode is actually on Hulu, not on Netflix. So do not pass Netflix. Do not collect $200. Just head on straight over to Hulu. Other than that, let's see, I covered birthdays. I covered the anniversary of the podcast. I corrected myself in advance. I talked about how great my mom is. I'll do that a lot in the episode, so prepare yourself for that. Yeah, I think we got it all. So I'm headed off to pack for this crazy beach vacation. And I hope you enjoy this conversation with my mom as much as I did. She is truly an incredible person. And we had so much fun doing this. So without any further ado, please enjoy this conversation with my beautiful mother, Dawn Newton.
Broken, a tragic romance game by Apon Games, is a storytelling game of tragic romance for two players about broken objects and broken hearts. Together, you and your play partner will create two characters in a relationship, and over the course of 10 scenes, you will explore the ways in which the things you loved about each other crack, until everything about your relationship is broken, including 10 real-life physical objects you will break over the game's 10 scenes. In Broken, the relationship will always end. Although the tragic conclusion is inevitable, there is endless potential for healing and self-discovery along the way. Broken is an emotionally deep game that explores themes of memory, identity, and loss. Broken is also full of empathy building, hope, and healing. It recreates the raw, visceral experience of going through a breakup, along with the catharsis of smashing objects, all while telling a beautiful story along the way. Get your copy of the Broken ebook edition now by going to bit.ly/brokengame. That's bit.ly/brokengame, or head to apongames.com, APON games.com today.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is a very exciting interview that I'm going to be doing today because the guest is my mother, Dawn Newton. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we were chatting for a little bit before we hit record, so it's kind of silly to be so formal. But so Mom, you have done a few podcasts here and there because you're an author, as we will discuss. But I know you're a little bit nervous, so I figured we'd just start off with some kind of like rapid fire questions, just about you,
sure,
to get to know you. So, what is your favorite color?
Two, fuchsia and royal blue.
Okay, I knew about the fuchsia. I didn't know about the royal blue. Okay, what is your favorite book?
That one is tough because for the longest time in my life, I loved Les Miserables, and then I always say that I loved it before there was a musical. And then I woke up one day and realized that most of my favorites were male authors because I didn't really start reading women authors other than romance writers and mystery writers until I was much older in college. And so now I really struggle because I have so many favorite women authors. I love Marilyn Robinson. I love, I get stuck if I don't have things written down. I just love a lot of different books by women. Yeah, let's come back to that one.
All right. Yeah, that's the big thing in our family is we're always giving each other books for holidays. So, All right. Well, what was your favorite movie as a kid? Favorite movie when you were a kid?
Um, I I don't remember a young kid. It would definitely be the Wizard of Oz and
Yeah. Yeah.
Cinderella
Yeah.
because I loved music. I loved Cinderella and I loved the Wizard of Oz. I just the songs really captivated me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on the subject of music, what's your favorite musical? I actually don't know. I'm a musical theater person, and I don't even know if I know the answer to this. I know you love Les Miserables, obviously, but
Yeah, that's interesting too because it's kind of like the way that I am with books. There's a part of me that's really stubborn and does not want to name one because there's so many that I like. But when I think about in the car yesterday, when Dad and I were on the way back from being up north, I played one of the songs from Jesus Christ Superstar. I Don't Know How to Love Him. I sang
yep.
that at an early age. Loved that musical. But my mom would also, when I was growing up, and I liked a song on television because she was a stenographer back when people used to do shorthand. She would copy the lyrics down in shorthand.
Mm.
So one of my favorite songs that I've thought about lately, not from a musical, is To Sir with Love. She wrote it all down in shorthand, and then I got worked on the melody and just things like that, random songs.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I have any other questions. What else do people ask about, like, favorites? I don't know. Well, I guess we can move on to, like, tell listeners a little bit about you, what you do, and just kind of I know that your childhood is a very big point of memory for you. You reference it in one of your books is about your childhood, is loosely based on your childhood. So I know that that's really important to you. So we can kind of talk about that and how that shaped you. So talk a little bit about who you are now, and then jump into, kind of how you came to be the person that you are now.
So first and foremost, now I'm the mother of 3 children. And that's a strain that's kind of gone through my whole life, in part because I loved children when I was young. I was a pretty major introvert, but I loved children and babysat a lot. And I also grew up in a working class family. And as I've developed over time, I realized that that's really significant because I was first generation college, and a lot of things have developed from that. But also, I grew up in a working class neighborhood that bordered a lake. So even though we did not live on a lake, the lake was available, and we had a little beach that we could buy a membership to, which meant you got a key. And I loved being in the water. I loved walking around the neighborhood. And this was, before I started working outside of babysitting. So summers for me were some of the most magical times because in addition to being able to walk around the neighborhood, to go to the beach, it was just a beautiful environment. And when our family went on vacations, like usually just in Michigan, we always had a lot of fun. And I felt like I grew up in this really, really loving family. As I got older, things got a little bit more complicated. My parents argued more, kind of headed for divorce when I was in college. My dad had some anger issues, but when I think about my childhood before adolescence, it was a very, very positive experience.
Yeah, I think that's normal I'm the same way. I look back at, like, the early years of childhood before puberty as just this very glossy or glimmery time. I guess it's worth mentioning too that you are recording in my childhood bedroom, which is now your office.
Yes. One of your childhood bedrooms.
Yeah.
The second house that
Second
we
half
had.
of my
Yes.
life.
And
Yeah.
people often comment that they love the purple walls. And I was like, yes, Rachel wanted purple walls. And I also had some purple walls when I was younger.
Perfect. Yeah, there you go. Well, so your family, you have two sisters, so you're the middle of three sisters.
Yes.
What was that like? I mean, I'm the oldest with two younger brothers. So I don't know what that experience is like, but from what I understand from things I've read and also, being close to the middle child in our family, being the middle child can be difficult. So what was that like, and how did that kind of impact your relationships with everybody in your family?
Well, I think I've thought about this a lot in terms of sexuality issues and in terms of personality issues. My older sister was 2 years older than I, and she was an extreme extrovert, kind of like my mother. She was comfortable in crowds, comfortable with a lot of people, and I was much more of an introvert. And I think as I grew older, I started to understand, especially, after puberty, I started to understand how my sister could be with guys and be comfortable with them and laugh. And I was much more, I won't say fearful, but reticent. I was really reticent. And I really liked being an introvert, and after I went through puberty or before, I mean, late elementary school, I would say, I developed these crushes. I called them crushes. I even wrote about them when I got to college, these just intense likings for people, males. And but I rarely wanted to act on those affections. So, I've come to believe over time that I was demisexual, and I didn't even learn what that meant until I was teaching college. And I had one of the last few years that I was teaching, I had two different classes that were really, really very much wanting to talk about sexuality. And when you teach creative writing, you're almost always end up getting into that territory because
Right.
It's about identity, and it's about things that you have in your brain that you want to get out. And as this young woman described it to me and gave me her definition, I thought, oh, wow, I always thought that I was kind of weird because I didn't date much, but it sounds like I wasn't weird. I was just not maybe the typical variety.
Right. Which is fine. And there are plenty of people who, I mean, we've talked a lot about, and I guess I'll add a caveat here. A lot of my friends think it is super strange that we have the relationship that we do, where we talk so openly about sexuality and everything. So I will caveat that here for people listening that I love it. I love that we have this relationship, but I know it's off-putting to some people who didn't grow up, talking about sexuality openly in their homes, which I think is a loss for them, but they seem okay with it. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny you should say that because I was thinking earlier about, I felt like our household, and I'd have to ask my sisters about this, but I felt like it was pretty open sexually. And one of the examples that I have, which is not a great one, of how I think that sexuality, evidence of it is that my father, when we were adolescents, would come home from work with these dirty jokes written on mimeographed pieces of paper. And when we were older, he would sometimes post them on the refrigerator. And that may not have been appropriate. But by the time we all learned about what sex was or whatever, we would just talk about it. Not a lot, but it came up. And once it was clear that we all knew the major terms and stuff, it was just an open topic. And I appreciated that a lot. Ironically, my mother was not the person who told me about sex. And this is kind of funny, too. We were in the basement with an older neighbor, really nice young man. And he was talking about words, and he talked about the F word. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that on your show, but I'll just call it.
The podcast's called Wine, Dine, and 69. You can say fuck.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't even know, there were rules back when I was a kid. So
No, you can say fuck.
I ended up saying, what does fuck mean? And it really threw him for a loop. And he just hemmed and hawed and hemmed and hawed. And I said, I can just ask my mother. And that horrified him. It horrified him that I would do that. So I think he felt like I was blackmailing him somehow.
You're like, no, I'm curious. And if you're not going to tell me, then I'll ask my mom. Yeah.
And it was sort of, I don't even remember what he told me. But of course, the follow-up was, I went to my mom and said, we were talking and this word came up and I wanted a definition, and he didn't want to give it to me. And so then my mom told me, and I don't even remember what she told me, but it felt like that, that was what I was going to do. The other example that I had that I always talk about from childhood, and this to me also kind of points at my reticence to engage with males, is that my friend came to me, probably this was in the years right before I would have transitioned to junior high school, and said her cousin was interested in making out with me. And did I want to do that? And the first thing I said was, well, I have to ask my mother. Yeah. After which, of course, my friend laughed. But her brother and sister were much older than my older sister. And I went back and I remember looking at this pan of vegetables that my mother was standing over. I mean, I'm sure she was cooking something else to go with it for dinner, but I remember looking at the water and the peas or the green beans and saying to her that, this cousin had asked if I wanted to make out, and what did she think about it? And she came back with a really good question, which was, well, what does making out mean to you? And I think I said, well, kissing and, just kissing and things like that. And she said to me, well, if that's something that you want to do, I guess that's okay. It's up to you.
And make sure that the other person has the same definition of making out that you do.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing to me is I think I wanted her to say no.
Yeah.
I think I wanted her to say no, and she didn't. And so often in life, when I was trying to make decisions, Mom, should I do this? Should I do that? She'd often say to me, I can't make that decision for you. And I know that I wasn't even that way with you guys. I wasn't that open. Sometimes I'd say, well, I think you should do this. But yes. I made the decision I did not want to do that. I just went back to my friend and said, well, tell him thanks, but
no thanks.
But no thanks.
Yeah.
So
for you, setting those boundaries. Well, I guess it kind of comes into, I'm thinking about how we've had these conversations about sex in relation to, I guess, gender dynamics, right? Like when you're talking about cis relationships, heteronormative relationships. We've talked about how and this will come into, I know that you wanted to touch on Roe v. Wade, so this will come into that. But, we've talked about how one of the reasons that you were so not interested in having sex or getting involved was because you knew that the risk of pregnancy was so great. And for you, looking at that risk of potentially having to drop out of school or get married to somebody that maybe you didn't want to get married to or whatever, you knew that and I feel like I don't even think that you taught me this, but I think that I intuitively, I don't know if it was the company that I was keeping at the time, but I think I intuitively adopted this mindset as well, which is there's so much more for a woman to lose in a heteronormative sense when they have sex. The risk is higher. You're more likely to get pregnancy. You can get UTIs. You can get yeast infections. STIs are equally easy for both men and women to get. But I mean, especially the pregnancy part, like it is so easy for your life to change in just an instant. And for me, and I think you and I have talked about for both of us, that risk was just too great. When both you and I were teenagers, I think we both kind of adopted that.
Well, I think that's certainly true. And I try to acknowledge that people have different interests, different personalities, different ways of looking at things. And I was a smart person and I wanted to achieve. It's ironic because since I babysat children early on and loved it, I knew that I wanted children. I knew that was one of the most important things in my life. And I even told a lot of college friends, if I can't find anyone, I will ask for a sperm donor. And I had a couple people in my head, picked out for that. And that was in college. And clearly I wasn't looking for it in the near term future, but it was something that I acknowledged.
You knew that you wanted that partner or no partner.
Yeah, partner or no partner. I was determined that I would have children because it was just something that I had always wanted. As much as I wanted to be a writer, as much as I wanted to be a successful person because I was smart and I got a lot of validation from things that I did in school. I think that knowledge that it was something that I really wanted, but the simultaneous knowledge that I was this person who didn't want to date, who didn't need that physicality of kissing various people. People are so different. And I think about, I was technically a virgin when I got married, meaning that I didn't have the kind of sex that would have led to pregnancy.
Right. Penetrative. I see what you mean. I was like, what does technically mean? But I see.
Yeah, that's it. I didn't have the kind of sex that would lead to pregnancy. So that's really interesting. I'm very, very pro-choice. And one of the reasons that I'm pro-choice is that I realize people are very, very different. And to be honest, I'm kind of hard on males. Back to what you were saying.
Yes, you are.
the woman has much more to lose. And young males, I think, even some of the best, nicest young males, we know that a male's sexuality peaks earlier than a female's. And I don't think sometimes they have the rationality to think it through. Whereas if you think about the consequences of a sexual encounter, so every time
it's like they black out when they're horny, and then they're like, oh.
But I don't even think they wake up the next morning coming to their senses.
Well,
I think that every time a woman has sex, unless she's able to to flush it out, or unless she's in a marriage where every new addition to the family would not bring about any problems.
Right.
I think every time a woman has sex, she automatically is thinking about what were the consequences of this act. And men do not have to think about that. So that, combined with the fact that while I grew up in the era, I was maybe 10 in the late 60s. I was 10 in the late 60s. So I grew up with the vestiges of the 60s, firmly in the 70s. And, there was free love left over. But still, women who delivered children outside of marriage were extremely stigmatized. I grew up with women who were in that situation. I grew up with women that sought abortions. And people talk either way in high schools about women who choose to have children, women who get abortions. But 30 years later, the products of those sexual encounters are different. If a woman chose to have an abortion versus a woman who chooses to have a baby at a young age. And I feel like they both get to have their choice. They both get to choose what they want to do. But who has more control over how the rest of a life will play out, or the rest of two lives will play out? The woman who has the abortion. And that takes it firmly out of the issue of conception and where someone's whether an embryo in the womb is a living thing, whether a fetus is a living thing. I have comments about that, but I think the way that I've come to look at the act of sex is and I probably would have said this, although I wouldn't have said it when my kids were young. I think I was part of the group of people that, child psychologists and pediatricians will say, when a kid asks, give them technical terms, talk to them about love, but don't give them more than they need. Make sure that it's an ongoing discussion and the person can continue to come back to you and talk about those things. And that's what I tried to do. So when you asked about sex, I don't even remember what I said. I just remember I was really worried that your best friend at the time's mother, if you told your best friend that I would have to have a conversation with her about what I had told you.
Yeah.
And I remember later, I don't remember how I told your siblings about sex either, but I do remember one of them on the way to a dentist appointment asked about what 69 meant, and the conversation was ongoing until we got into the dentist appointment. And I remember there was a piece of paper available, and I'm not much of an artist, so it was just this little squiggle on a piece of paper, and we laughed about it, but we couldn't talk because there were people around. But it was a follow-up to kind of explain. And so that's the way I felt about that. But I have to go back to the Roe versus Wade, because I'm really, I have really strong feelings about this, and I have this.
As soon as I asked you, do you want to do this? You were like, can I talk about Roe v. Wade? And I was like, we can talk about whatever you want to talk
Well,
about.
I've got this rubric that I created, and I'm sure that other people have created something like this. I don't know if it's a rubric, a metric, whatever, but this is how I think decisions should be made about abortion. So, A, all women who have produced viable eggs in their lifetime are allowed to have an opinion about abortion. So both pro-life and pro-choice women who have had viable eggs at some point in the process of their life get to have an opinion, and I will respect either one, which is one of the reasons that I strongly respected your grandmother, my mother-in-law, because she lived with her pro-life decisions. When it comes to men, though, my feeling is that the only men who get to have an opinion, who get to vote on the issue of abortion, and I have to look at my notes here to see how I said this, are men with viable sperm who have always used a working condom and or have always been willing to live with their partner's choice should an act of sex result in an unexpected pregnancy. No exceptions. Because immediately after an act of sex, men never have to think about whether or not conception might occur, and women always do.
Yeah.
And I have a lot more thoughts on the subject. I won't go into it now, but because I've had a spontaneous abortion, which is a miscarriage, and because in a subsequent visit with a genetic doctor when I was carrying a pregnancy after that miscarriage, because of some of the things that he said, I have come to believe that even very nice, good, well-intentioned men can be completely clueless about
a lot. Yeah, it's funny too because we talk about protection, and I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with friends where I ask, "Oh, but did you use protection?" And they go, "Oh, like I'm on birth control," or like if it's a guy, "Oh no, she's on birth control," and it's like STIs are still a thing, yo. Like that, like that's still some, like even if you're not worried about pregnancy, there is other things that you should completely be worried about right now. So
well, and I think and this is going to sound really egotistical in a lot of ways, but I used a couple of different forms of birth control, not a wide range, mostly a diaphragm and birth control pills. But keep in mind, I did not have the kind of sex that could get me pregnant before I got married. So mostly I used birth control within a marriage situation.
right.
But I had a great memory. I took other medicines for my asthma. I remembered to take the birth control pills every day that I needed to when I took birth control.
Oh, shoot. I got to take mine today. Thanks for the reminder. Not that it
But
matters.
it's like, what if you don't have a great memory?
Right.
Or what if you're a male who is having a relationship with a woman and you just leave it to her? Now, I think this is dicey because I would have a hard time with someone who said to me every day, "Did you take your birth control pill today? Did you?" I mean,
Right.
I really struggle with that. But on the other hand, it just seems very cavalier. I mean, putting that condom on, at least, I mean, at the very least, makes a man think about conception. And the best part of it too is it does provide protection about the STDs or STIs. And so yeah, that's
Yeah.
men need to have the responsibility of thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I completely don't disagree. But you kind of brought up, and we've been talking before I hit record about the way that you did talk to me about sex, and I can just kind of go over it a little bit, because this is one of I mean, you are an excellent parent, but there are a few moments that really stick out to me as I'm just like, man, if I had kids, I would want to do it exactly the way that she did that. Like, that was like a really badass parenting moment. And this is one of them, which is when I was in the third grade. I was 8. I was in the third grade, and we were doing like geometry, and my teacher couldn't remember the shape, a hexagon or whatever. So people were giving her suggestions, and I was like, a sexagon? And everybody laughed because we were 8 and immature. But I came home, and very much like you being like, well, I have to ask my mom, I was like, what's this? Why did everybody laugh when I said this? And you kind of didn't mention it at the moment, but the next time that we were up north at the cottage, you were like, let's go take a walk. So we took a walk, and we walked all the way to the end of the association, and we had a conversation where you told me the bare bones of how it works. And I was, number one, incredulous as to how that could feel good. But also I was just like, why didn't I think of this? They're obviously puzzle pieces that like are meant to go together. Like, I remember thinking that when I was 8. Like, of course, but we walked, and I asked questions, and we talked about it. And you did tell me, at that time, that I'd prefer for you to wait because it's a really big responsibility. And your life changes a lot when you start doing it. But I remember you saying, but if at any point you think that you do want to start doing it, or you find yourself in a relationship or a situation where you feel like you need to start, taking birth control, please come to me. I will not judge you. I will take you to the doctor. We can go and we can get what you need and have a conversation. Again, I would prefer if you waited till marriage. Sorry, I didn't. But I want to make sure that if you are going to do it, that you do it safely. Which I shouldn't have been surprised that that's how you handled it. But just the older I get it, the more I'm just like, man, like, you hit all the right points. You gave me the definition. You made it personal and told me about your experience, which would maybe horrify some people, but I host the Wine Dine 69 podcast, so whatever. And yeah, you hit the points. Like, you made it personal and explained it to me, and you answered my questions. You weren't weird about it. You didn't try to shame me into feeling like it was something that I shouldn't want. Like, you were explaining to me it's a natural thing to have, these urges, especially as you get older. And you said, I would prefer that you waited for a number of reasons. But if you're not going to, don't feel like you need to keep it from me, because I want to make sure that above all, you're safe. And like, I just look back at that still, and I'm like, man, like, really, really excellent parenting. I got to hand it to you.
Well, I didn't remember the details of that. I'm glad that I approached it that way. I think I probably was not as open-minded when you had your first boyfriend, and
nobody wanted me to have sex with him, and I didn't, everybody. So we can rest assured that
so
I avoided that, and everybody who knows that situation is sighing a huge sigh of relief right now.
So I think, I think mothers can say really rational things when they're not in a moment of,
Yep. No, I get it. But I guess like that kind of makes me wonder, what are your thoughts on talking about sex and parenting? Like, I don't think you should have done anything differently, but what are your thoughts on, families that just, I have some friends who their families never talked about it. They let the school take care of it, or they, like it was very much like a purity culture thing, like your purity is to be prized, that type of thing. Like, what are your thoughts on like the different, I mean, I don't want to like shame anybody for, parenting that I disagree with. I'm not a parent, but as somebody who thinks that you did it really right and I turned out pretty fucking great, like, I'm just kind of curious as to what your thoughts are and the dangers of not being open with your kids.
Well, I think, I mean, most of the time I feel like people should have the opportunity to raise children the way they feel inclined. I think it's a little bit more difficult when parents tell other people how to raise their kids. Having said that, the shaming factor is a big deal. I wanted to be able to talk to you guys little by little as the doctors. When I say doctors, I mean the experts that you read parenting books or psychologists. I wanted to do it that way and to have the information freely available. The purity thing just seems like, for me, maybe it could work, but if it becomes something with a ceremony attached to it, then it becomes
especially
less
when it's
private.
the girl and it's the girl and her dad. She's tying herself to her. Oh, it grosses me out so much.
Well, that part of it, I'm suspect of when it becomes an external thing that external people know, or I worry about that. The sex education thing, I have some really interesting thoughts about, because I was fine with the three of you being given sex education in class. I wanted to see the materials. I believe that most of you knew all of that ahead of time. And I do think that if parents get to that point where the school asks them to sign papers, they really should take care of divulging that information themselves.
Right.
Because that's their right, and that's their possibility. Not possibility. What word am I looking for? Responsibility. Yeah. And the I had another thought that just left my head, but another one of the thoughts that I had in my head that was interesting was I was seeing some of the protest for Roe v. Wade yesterday, which I obviously think a woman's right to abortion is essential, but a woman had brought her young daughters to a protest, and I know the age for telling people about sex is much younger than it used to be, which I think is fine.
You told your youngest, I remember I was at camp when I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, and I still have the letter where you wrote to me when I was away at camp and were like, we told your brother about sex.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, so I looked at that and I had two simultaneous feelings at the same time. I was like, wow, I think it's great that this woman took her kids to the march. And then I thought, well, what do you think about the girl's ability to make that decision for herself? That's what she wanted to protest. And I thought,
parenting is indoctrination. Let's be real.
Well, that's the thing that I think I struggle with, is that you want to be able to give your children the tools to make good decisions. But in so many ways you can't. I mean, it's like when the election with George W. Bush, your father was talking a lot of negative stuff about that particular candidate, and I
The
was
word pinhead came up pretty frequently, if I recall.
I was really worried that your brother might carry it to school and repeat it to his friend whose parents were on a more conservative had a more conservative viewpoint. And I think it was this weird thing I had about protecting the sanctity of an individual's opinion, which you can't really do because parenting is indoctrination, but I think I want it to not be indoctrination. Do you know what I mean?
No.
And you can't. I mean, you just can't for the safety reasons. You have to teach your children, no, you can't run in the road. No, you can't put your hand on the burner. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about these things.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. And I do see the challenge there because you do want, I remember you were thrilled when I was thinking of voting green because you were like, oh my gosh, yeah, like that's great. That's great that you're, thinking about what you might want to do outside of, what we do. So,
right. And that's also my desire for a more than two-party system.
Right. Yeah. I mean, God knows we need it, but, well, I'm wondering, well, first I wanted to say there's a movie out there that listeners should check out. And I think you and Dad should have like a date night and watch this movie because I think you would both find it fascinating and disgusting and appalling at the same time. It's called Pure.
Oh.
And it's about this like purity camp. Are you writing it down? Yeah. I think it's on Netflix. I saw it a few years ago, but it's called Pure. And it's about the purity culture and a camp where like a bunch of girls like do this purity ceremony, but things don't go really according to plan because the goddess Lilith has some things that, might have to come up. So it's really good. I was really surprised at how much I liked it. So yeah, the movie's called Pure. I think I saw it on Netflix, but kind of moving away because I mean, your identity as a mother and as, an intelligent person and somebody who, has had sex and somebody who is interested in these social issues are all parts of your personality. But I mean, we don't have a ton of time left, but I do want to be able to touch on a really major part of your identity is as a writer. And kind of talk to me a little bit about that, about how you was it kind of like having kids where you just knew that it was something that you needed to do? And then I know that you met Dad, you and Dad have a very painful for you, but in retrospect, wildly romantic tale of meeting in college and being friends on and off for a very long time before deciding that you're madly in love with each other. And I think our together have been married for over 30 years now. 30. Oh, in 2 days, it'll be your anniversary.
Yeah. So the thing with the writing is I knew when I was young that I liked to write. I wrote poems, song lyrics, and then I wrote essays and short stories pretty early in life, a lot in high school. And I won some awards in high school, and I participated in forensics, which is speech competition, and I usually wrote first person essays for that. But I was a smart person, and somehow my sisters and I decided that we were definitely going to college. So my life was a lot about doing really well in school and then, having a job in high school so that I could afford to go to college, make money to go to college. And, ironically, one job led to another. When you're trying to pay back student loans, you don't have as much freedom as as you do if your parents are able to pay for your college wholly. And I in high school, I thought about other professions like being a doctor or a scientist because I loved science, but I was so drawn to the writing and literature. And the first semester of college, I had a partial writing scholarship, so I did have to declare English as one of my majors. I was going to have another one, but I watched myself during the first semester of college, and uh, that's what I put all my time and energy into, is writing my English papers, writing my whatever essays or short stories I needed to write for my writing classes. And I didn't put as much energy into other things, although I still love science and I like to read about science. So as I worked over the course of my life, mostly it was about having kids, providing them supposedly better life than I had as a kid, although I never felt deprived of anything as a kid, but more lessons, more extracurriculars. And one thing led to another, and I mostly wasn't able to get a stable job as I had hoped. I did a lot of adjunct work because I decided that the teaching was really important to me, and I didn't seem to have the wherewithal to be able to hold down a full-time job and raise my children at the same time. And then I got diagnosed with cancer at the age of 52, 53, right in that border. It wasn't both ages. It was the week between 52 and 53.
It really was. Yeah.
So, so I hung on to my adjunct job one more year and tried to make it work. But since I'd originally been given 6 to 18 months to live, and then I was given, maybe 2 to 3 years to live.
Side note, it's been almost 10 years for everybody listening. It's been almost 10 years.
That's the thing, is that I'm an outlier now. And this fall, I celebrate, or whatever, 10 years. And the last few years have been the time in my life when I have really felt legitimate calling myself a writer, because I've been able to publish a couple books. Prior to that, I had, throughout the course of my life, published in small literary magazines, which is what so many people have to do these days. People who are not bestseller writers, who aren't embraced by the top magazines or the top publishers. Most of us who teach and write, we embrace both parts of our lives, and the kind of publications we get are not the kind that make us any money. They augment what we make as teachers. And I've been disabled / unemployed since a year and a half after I left work, my adjunct position. And that's largely because, with 2 to 3 years projected for my life, I wanted to spend it with my youngest, who was still in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And yet now, with a longer life, I've been given this gift of being able to write enough so that I could publish things from earlier in my life in terms of full-fledged books.
Yeah, which is pretty, I want to ask, first I'll have you talk about the books that you've published, but then kind of want to hear what you're working on now.
Okay, so the books that I've published, the first book I published was a memoir on cancer. And It's important for me to say that is not the first book that I completed. Uh, the book that I completed is the novel that I published second, called The Remnants of Summer, which had a a complete draft that I circulated in the year 2001. Ironically, the year of 9/11. I was circulating it at the time that 9/11 occurred. I remember writing to literary agents um, and telling them how sorry that I was when they would send me an email saying, I've been looking at your book. I wanted to look at it before now, but things have been horrible here.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, your book
and
is largely about grief.
Yeah, and my book is about grief. And at that time, I mean, I'd had an agent back when I was younger, before I had children, the year before I had you. Had an agent. I had given her a collection of short stories that she tried to market, and she said, "Well, um, I couldn't get this one after we tried for a while. I couldn't get this one out, but finish the novel you're working on, and maybe we can have a 2-book deal." And then I just got busy with parenting, and it
I was
took
not an
me
easy child.
took me a while. So the Remnants of Summer, my second book, is a novel, but it has Michigan as its place, and I captured a lot of my childhood in that book, although it is fiction. So the events that take place in there, while some of them were drawn from things that happened in my childhood, they are not real events, but they do capture, because I started writing it before my parents died, they do capture the grief that I felt after my parents died, very close together in 1993 when I was pregnant with my second child. Winded, the first book I wrote as I was going through cancer. And when I say going through, what I should clarify, I'm still going through cancer, but it was the first year of my being on um, a cancer drug for stage 4 lung cancer. And it's a drug that, as they advertise on television, gives you more time, but does not cure you of cancer. You still have
Right.
stage 4 lung cancer.
Yeah, there's no remission. And that's what I have to explain to people. It's a matter of, people are like, oh, she's been around for 10 years. Like, that's incredible. Is she cured? And it's like, no, we're just really, really lucky. I was on a message board. I'm on a support group for people who have and are loved ones of people who are on the drug that you're on right now. And a woman had posted saying that her husband was given a quote, and she was like, please, can people please just give me some hope that it might be longer than they're saying that it is. These are the drugs that he's on. And I was like, well, my mom was diagnosed in 2012, and she was given around that same amount of time, and she is still kicking. So, and everybody was just so overjoyed. It gave everybody a lot of hope. So,
yeah.
But it's definitely challenging. And I mean, I think it's interesting that you wrote Remnants of Summer first, but both the memoir and Remnants of Summer really do deal with the subjects of grief, just in different ways. In Remnants of Summer, it's the grief of losing another person, and in Winded, it's looking at your own mortality in the face, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
But I know it's crazy. It's like you've published these 2 books, and now it's like, well, what are you doing now? Like, if I feel like you keep being like, well, all right, I did this thing, so now I'm just going to lay back. And then it's like, nope, there's a TikTok I'll have to send you, which is just kind of like people are dancing, and then the song comes to this huge crescendo, and then they're like, whew, relax. Okay, we can relax now. And then the music starts back up again, and they're like really jarred because they're like, wait, I wasn't expecting it to keep going. So
right.
It's kind of how I imagine.
Well, I think actually that's a really good metaphor for where I find myself in life now, because there is a ton of downtime, and I never feel like I'm able to explain this to people very well. I I have down days, and by that I mean I wake up, I'm in a fog, even if I take my drugs, which were a combination of, uh, uh, antidepressants, a stimulant that helps me think. Things are really foggy. I'm really achy. Spots in my body with uh, that used to have, my lung cancer metastasized to my bones before it was diagnosed. Um, I have some really bad days in terms of being able to function, and I'm not with it. My memory, which used to be amazing, has really deteriorated. Um, and I'm not as fast. The world has sped up around me. I can't speak as quickly. I can't answer questions as quickly. Um, there are some really difficult things, and the constant doctor appointments, because if you're being kept alive, you do have to be checking in with doctors who are helping you not only take care of the cancer, but the side effects of your cancer drugs, which are um,
Numerous and
significant.
frustrating. Yeah.
They're significant. I don't want to. I don't begrudge. I mean, I'm so happy that I've had the ability, but I will put in a little plug here for universal health care. I am privileged in that uh, I have health insurance. And many people who are given the diagnosis that I'm given, they don't get to have the test done that shows that they have a genetic mutation that might be uh, conducive to the $8,000, $9,000 a month
Right.
pill
Right.
that insurance helps to pay for. So it's a funny world that I live in. It's got upsides, it's got downsides, but it clearly shows the privileges that come from having health insurance.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely true. Yeah. I mean, in the same Facebook group, people were like, "How much do you pay for your Tagrisso?" Like, and it was people from around the world. And in Australia, it was $16. And then in another
Wow.
place, it was like 30,000 euro. Like, it's just it's wild. So, but it's yeah, no, and it's funny. A lot of people, say to me, and I'm sure you get this too. Like, wow, like you're able to talk about this so matter of factly, and it's like, well, like it's part of the story. It's part of the journey now, and you like all you can really do is be grateful, right? Like, and try to be as
Well,
supportive as
I
possible.
I will put in though. I will put in this thought. I do always reserve um, the right not to be grateful,
Oh,
and I think it's on behalf of other people, but it's also on behalf of myself. I feel that I could talk for a long time about ways that it's affected me, and how I do feel like I've sort of become marginalized in that I don't speak with people. Uh, I don't speak a lot with people at large about my cancer, because I've there's just too much to say, and
yeah,
if you get to live longer and you complain, there's
yeah,
almost sort of this well, you shouldn't complain because so many people don't get to live longer. So
exactly.
you end up, the way I describe it, you end up in this different cohort. You don't get to complain about the fact that you'll probably never meet any grandchildren that you'll have, because you're in the cohort of the person who has gotten to live longer with cancer. So you can't compare yourself with the average person who lives, longer, maybe in their 70s, who gets to have grandchildren. So it's a weird sort of dynamic.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I mean, it would just be better if cancer didn't exist and everybody got to live into their, 80s.
Right. As well as other disease. But what I'm saying is, people do have to learn, and that's what I've come to, is you have to learn how to live with the chips on your shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I feel really strongly about is I keep these chips on my shoulder. There's several of them. There's this chip of growing up working class and feeling that I never quite moved above it, even though by marrying my husband and living a life without cancer for 50 years, I was able to position my children for living a middle class life. Although, who knows if they'll be able to continue with it. I mean, that's one of the things about the world now is class is it's getting harder and harder to be even lower middle class. But I feel that my class and my cancer, those are chips on my shoulder, and I try to move them off, but sometimes it's hard. And so a good day is when I can just look around, I can be mindful. I mean, I just got back from a 5-day vacation where the weather was perfect. I was able to have a variety of activities with my husband. And on those days when I'm just appreciating the present and appreciating what the moment brings me, I can pretty much just swap those chips right off my shoulder.
Yeah.
But I know that there are days when they're going to come back. Yeah. And I feel that I have to accept that that's just part of the process. That I love it when I hear about people who can say, "Oh, I'm so grateful. I'm just grateful every day." And I say, "Good for you." I'm not. I try to applaud myself when I can be grateful, but if I'm honest, and most of my life I've tried to be honest, I'm not there. I'm living in this world where it's okay for me to be mostly grateful.
Yeah.
And to have some days where those chips are not on my shoulder. And those are the best.
Yeah. That's I think what I've learned too, is that there's going to be some days where you're able to look around and just have that gratitude. But there are other days where that's really hard to do 100% of the time.
It is
for anybody. So I definitely can't do it. So it's difficult, but I mean, and I think another thing that's worth, mentioning, and I think, you mentioned that you're in this cohort of people who have survived for such a long time. But I think it's also important to mention that doesn't mean that you don't struggle on a day-to-day basis. Just because your tests are coming back clean, and we've talked about a lot about this as a family, just because your tests are coming back clean doesn't mean that you're not in pain, doesn't mean that you're not struggling with side effects, doesn't mean that you're not facing your mortality in the face every day. And I think that as, your child, that's been an important thing for me to learn too. Just,
Well, I see. That's what I just realized. That's what I was starting to say, but I lose my train of thoughts. Is that people haven't? I don't believe people have yet studied what is the effect on children of or offspring, because children means age limited. Offspring can be your whole life. What is the effect on offspring who have to live with a parent who has been given this, you're only supposed to live for a certain number of years, but we're hoping you'll exceed that. These somewhat so-called miracle cases where the drug, for whatever reason, holds a person living longer, and there's no clear explanation, because there's an element of always waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yep. I call it
Which I've-
preemptive grief.
Yeah, and what's been the effect on my children? We don't know that. We don't know that. I don't know how much harder that has made your lives.
Yeah. No, I don't know, but I do know that for a very long time, it was just, are the scans good? Are the scans good? Okay, cool. Like, you know what I mean? And then it's like, no, like just because the scans are good doesn't mean that there aren't things that are happening. So it's definitely been a thing to come to as a family. But I guess like in the last few minutes, kind of talk to me about what you've learned through all of this, you know, what you've learned through these chips on your shoulders, what you've learned, you know, you have this, I don't have my bracelet on right now, but you have this quote in your book that says, dying with cancer is helping me to learn to live with hope. And I always thought that was a really profound line. So like, what are some things that you think you've learned through just the course of your life, from being raised in the working class family, from, you know, losing your parents months apart from each other, to, you know, not dating and just being very much a wallflower. You describe yourself as that, not my word.
Yeah.
But yeah, like what are some things that you think in this course of this life of yours, like if you had to give pieces of advice or wisdom, you know, I mean, this podcast is going to be around forever, so it's on the internet. So
Well,
what you want to say.
First, I will give you a shout out. My daughter Rachel made up these lovely bracelets that say "Live with Hope," and they're purple with blue lettering, very vibrant. And I wear that, and my kids wear that. I think as a person who's been an introvert and who has always had more interests than I could manage, a person who had really severe asthma as a kid, and now had to deal with cancer, is what I've learned most is about giving. The person that I'm most likely to be hardest on is myself. Although I know as I'm getting older, I can be impatient with other people. So what I try to do is give myself a break and not be too hard on myself. I still expect a lot of myself, but I try not to beat myself up for the things that I'm not able to accomplish. I'm trying more to live in the moment. I know that mindfulness is a buzzword now, but for me, it really helps because as a person who spent a lot of time in my head analyzing things and often finding myself wanting, I haven't been a negative person, and yet I am hard on myself, and can see the downsides of life. I do think it ends up being about balance, and if you can find ways, like with dancing, which I love to dance, even though I'm not particularly talented, I love to dance solo. It brings me a lot of joy. It gets me out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
I love to sing. I'm trying more and more to sort of tabulate the things that make me really happy. And instead of looking for wide swaths of time, in which something might be sustained. I appreciate sort of interludes. So if I can have an interlude where I read for 50 minutes in the afternoon, it reminds me of my childhood when, before I worked, I would go to the library, get a huge stack of books, and come home and read all afternoon after I'd been to the beach and been swimming, just read all afternoon. And now if I can do that for 50 minutes, wow, that's really a good afternoon. I have always been a listener, but as I get older, I value that much more than I used to. And I value the fact that I am a listener, and I value the act of listening even more. I feel like our world is so fast paced. There are lots of reasons why people don't really have time to listen to people. Sometimes it's boring to listen to people. Sometimes people talk about things that you're not really wanting to listen to. So I do limit my listening. I'll admit that while I was with your father on a business trip, there was a stranger someplace who was talking for reasons that weren't really clear to those of us who were listening. And I just walked away because I thought, all right, you know what? I don't know how much longer my life is going to be, but I'm not going to listen to you. But other people that want to talk to me, and that want to sit down and talk, I like listening.
Yeah.
We need to listen more.
Yep, I can definitely agree with that. And I think that's a good piece of advice to end on. But I do want, you have a blog, you have a social media presence, and I'll link your books on Amazon. Just kind of talk about those things and where people can find you if they want to keep up with you and glean more wisdom.
Yeah, it's funny. First of all, I'll give you the title of my books. The memoir, which was 2019, is Winded, a memoir in 4 stages. And that's because I have stage 4 cancer, and also because there are 4 sections of the book. The novel is The Remnants of Summer. That's 2021. They are available on Amazon. There's a local bookstore in Michigan, Schuler Books, that sells it. And actually, any bookstore that you might want to order a book from, and of course, I usually plug independent bookstores. You can order those books. I'm on and off social media, and I'm in my 60s, and I still don't understand whether or not I should give out my blog address. I will admit I'm not always good at keeping up on it, and the last few times that I've opened it, there are so many inappropriate contact notices I get that
On your blog?
Yeah, and in the blog, you get these. I get really
People
inappropriate content.
sliding into the DMs.
Pardon?
People sliding into the DMs.
Yeah, I learned that expression from you guys. I still kind of don't know what it means, but it happens all the time on my blog. So I'm like, okay, should I not be putting? So what I do say to people is, okay, you've got my name, Dawn Newton. Find me on WordPress.
Okay.
Not going to give you the address, but find me on WordPress. Find me on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah, and I won't link the WordPress, but I'll link your which Instagram account is it that you use for the writing? Or are they both for
Uh,
your writing?
but I answer both of them on the writing.
All right. All right. Well, Mom, this has been probably my favorite interview I've ever done. Thank you for sitting down with me to do it. I really appreciate it. And as always, your vulnerability and strength and just willingness to share. I love you very much, and I appreciate you.
Wow. Thank you so much. I was honored to be asked, and it is, I am very proud of you and your accomplishments. And of course, I missed you and your brothers when Dad and I were in front of the water. I Family's really important to me, and I'm really proud of you.
I'm proud of you too. And yeah, thank you, listeners, for being here. I'm going to go and cry now. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I'll link where you can reach out to my mom on various places on the internet. And thank you for listening. You've been listening to Wine, Dine, and 69. I'm your host, Rachel Dalton, here with my badass mom, Dawn Newton. And let's keep talking.